Hello everyone and welcome to this lesson. Today we will look at opposite numbers and absolute value. Okay, now let's begin with opposite numbers. Look at 2 points, A and B. Point A is negative 5 and point B is positive 5. You can see that from 0 to negative 5 we have got 5 units. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Then also from 0 to positive 5 we have got 5 units. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now we can say that negative 5 and 5 are opposite numbers. Negative 5 and 5 are opposite numbers. So, what do you think are opposite numbers? Yes? If you have two numbers and they have the same distance from 0, then it implies that those two numbers are opposite numbers. For example, if I look at negative 1, from 0 I have got 1 unit, and also then I look at positive 1. From 0 I also have 1 unit. So this implies that negative 1 and 1 are opposite numbers. Look at positive 2. I have got 2 units from 0 to positive 2. But also I have 2 units, 1, 2, to go to negative 2. So since the distance from 0 is equal, then we say that negative 2 is the opposite of positive 2. So, what are other opposite numbers on this number line? What are other opposite numbers? You can pause the video and find out other opposite numbers. Okay, now let's look at absolute value. For example, if we want to locate negative 3, how can we get it? Now, we can see that this is point 0. And when we talk about negative, we have to go to the left of 0. But then, how many units are we going to count from 0 to go to negative 3? Let's check. We have got 1, 2, and 3. So, negative 3 will be at this point. And you can see that we have got 3 units from 0. Okay? Now, we can say that the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. Why 3? It is because we have got 3 units to go to negative 3 from 0. So, what is absolute value? It is the distance between 0 and that integer. So, if I talk about the absolute value of negative 3, then I need to find out how many units do I have from 0 to negative 3. I can see that there are 3 units. Then the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. Okay? Now, let us understand this very well. Look at the integer, negative 3. This is the sign, and this is the absolute value. So you just take away the sign to remain with the absolute value. So the absolute value is the distance between the integer and 0. Okay? It's the distance between that integer and 0 on a number line. Now, student, look, I've got -1. What do you think will be the absolute value of -1? In other words, what is the distance between 0 and -1? The distance between 0 and -1 is 1 unit. So we say that the absolute value of -1 is 1. Okay? Now, what do you think, students? Can an absolute value be a negative? Can we have a negative absolute value? No. It's because we just count the distance between 0 and the integer. So we cannot say that the absolute value is a negative. The absolute value can be 0 or positive. Okay? Now, the absolute value of A can be represented by this symbol. We just have to have two vertical lines, and in between them we get the integer. So this one we can say that it is the absolute value of A. Look, the absolute value of -5, we know that it is 5. In other words, we have got 5 units from 0 to go to -5. But then we can write it in this format: 2 vertical lines and -5 in the middle. Then this means the absolute value. So the absolute value of -5 is 5. Okay? We know that a positive number can also be written with a positive sign. When we write a positive number, we can write it without a positive sign, or we can write it with a positive sign. Now, what is the absolute value of 5? We just need to have it as 5. So if we need to show it using a symbol, we write 5 between 2 vertical lines. Okay? Now let's look at some examples. Write down the opposite numbers and absolute values of the following integers. We have got 2, we have got -8, we have got 45, and -876. Okay, so now let's get our solution. Number 1, the opposite number of 2 will be -2, and the absolute value of +2 is 2. Okay, we go next. The opposite number of -8 is 8, and the absolute value of -8 is 8. Okay, the opposite number of 45 is -45, and the absolute value of 45 is 45. The opposite number of -876 is 876, and the absolute value of -876 is 876. Now, this example, I believe it has made you understand the difference between opposite numbers and absolute values of integers. Okay? We look at another example. Find the values of the following. Okay? Number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. Let's begin with part 1. We need to know the absolute value of negative 29. Of course, we know that is 29. Number 2, we need to know the absolute value of negative 16 but negative. So definitely we know that the absolute value of negative 16 is 16. But then because we have this negative, we indicate this negative here. Okay? Part 3. We have got the absolute value of negative 3 plus 22. Yes, the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. Now we add there 22 to get 25. Okay? Finally, we need to know the absolute value of negative 10 plus the absolute value of negative 18. So, the absolute value of negative 10 is 10, and the absolute value of negative 18 is 18. So, we have got 10 plus 18, which is 28. I believe you have really understood this very well. Let's move on and get the final example. Fill in each box with greater than or less than. So this is part 1, and then we get part 2. We begin with part 1. We have got the absolute value of 29, of negative 29, and then the negative absolute value of negative 16. So we know that the absolute value of negative 29 is 29, and then the absolute value of negative 16, it is 16. But because of this negative, we will get negative 16. And then we know that 29 is more than negative 16. Okay? Our final example, we have got the absolute value of negative 3 plus 22, then the absolute value of negative 10 plus the absolute value of negative 18. So then we will get 25 here, and this side we will get 28. We know that 25 is less than 28. Okay? So I believe that you have really understood what we call absolute value and what we call opposite number of an integer. Thank you for watching and have a good day.